Hey, what's up internet? Just wanted to show off this cool null star nuke build I cooked up for you, which, as you should already be able to see, is pretty darned effective. Nova recently got a huge suite of buffs to bring her to the modern age, which I am not going to go over in depth, because it's a lot, and most of it isn't really relevant to the build here. So instead I'm just going to try and quickly run down the build for you to copy and understand, aight? Of course, the star of the show is the newly revamped neutron star augment, which now has a much more powerful effect, making it suitable for nuking. Between its innate AoE and the forced blast procs enemies are inflicted with, there's a lot of quadratic scaling going on here, meaning the damage output scales heavily with enemy density. Thankfully, Nova has access to her speed up ability, and when combined with a rapidly firing cordon from Nautilus Prime, this results in a constant stream of enemies forming neat little clumps right in front of your face for you to nuke the moment your one is off its internal cooldown. But you need more than just cordon and the augment to make the nuke really pop, and the missing key ingredient is Nourish. Nourish is without question the best in slot helmet ability for Nova's Neutron Star nuke build. The chief reason for this is that Null Star is one of those rare abilities that is treated as a sort of weapon damage, and so Nourish will actually apply its effect in full to all of the Null Star particles. This both significantly increases their innate damage, as the bonus viral damage is being added to each particle's innate blast damage, and makes it so the force status procs now also frequently proc viral as well. According to my testing, without the augment or nourish, each particle always procs 1 blast, and this output jumps to 1 heat and 2 blast when you put the augment on. And for the enemies in the augment's AoE but not directly hit, one of both statuses are applied. I suspect this behavior is a bug, but, works for me. Then when you add Nourish to the mix, it would appear that while the heat status is a forced proc that occurs every time, the blast and viral procs are randomly determined based on the particle's new elemental weighting. In other words, a stronger Nourish means a viral proc is more likely. For the record, it takes exactly 223 strength for viral to become more likely than blast, as that is when your bonus viral damage from Nourish exceeds 100%. So even ignoring the free energy it gives, it's already best in slot for damage, as it will multiply your damage output several times over, thanks to both the base damage increase and the additional viral procs. And since you're now proccing 3 statuses on the regular, blast, heat, and viral, this makes it very easy for Nautilus's manifold bond to proc and repeatedly lower all its cooldowns. Speaking of, here's the Nautilus Prime build I was using, though since Reinforced Bond is not really getting used here, you could swap that out for Spare Parts or Guardian instead. Or you could just drop one of the shield mods and put both in. And here's the Verglas build I was using. It's spec'd around high uptime and maximum AoE via gas procs so as to optimally proc Synth Deconstruct, and its slow can help as yet another way to make enemies drop health orbs. Alternately, you could use the Tassicore, cause that's good now too. The only other major component really rounding out the build here is a Fort Grimoire. Since we're killing with our abilities, we might as well take advantage of a free 60% strength buff, along with 2 augur mods for the set bonus and fortifier for some very useful overguard generation. Here's the mod page I was using if you're curious, but it doesn't really matter beyond the stuff I just mentioned. Now, the strength buff and the overguard do require you to actively use the book's alt fire, but I find it's fairly easy to remember to do this, since, as astute observers may have already noticed, I am rapidly toggling my weapons back and forth like a madman the whole time I'm running this build. That's because another quirk of the weapon-esque ability property that Nullstar has going for it is that it also benefits from the buff bestowed by Vigorous Swap, and this buff is quite powerful indeed. It acts as a multiplicative damage boost, sort of like if you were slotting a Serration into your Nullstar. You can also get the same stat from Arcane Arachne and Holster Amp. These buffs are all additive with each other, but they can each provide a very hefty damage boost. Unfortunately, all of these buffs are kind of annoying to maintain, as you either need to swap weapons every 3 seconds or wall latch every 30 seconds, but the damage gains are worth the trouble in the end, if you ask me. Alright, now that you know what's going on, let's go ahead and peep the mod pages. I got 2 for you here. One is the more min-maxed YOLO style, the other is the more reserved defensive style, opting to drop Overextended and Umbral Intensify for Augur Reach and Adaptation. The latter is definitely safer and less reliant on you having your companion and Grimoire to rely on, though it's a better general purpose build, but it does sacrifice the sheer performance of the Overextended build. I'm using the safer build in the demo here though, so clearly it still performs pretty well. Usually I find adaptation is not needed for survivability, as Nova maintains a 90% DR buff at all times, while the constant Null Star spam actually does a very good job of keeping enemies crowd controlled and unable to fight back. Combine that with an Augur mod or 3, the automatic retaliatory viral splash you get from Nourish, fortifier on your Grimoire, and possibly Guardian on your Sentinel, and you'll generally be doing just fine. Adding adaptation on does help to really lock it down and make your survival foolproof though. You could also drop Arachne for a more defensive mod like Aegis or even Eruption. Also, a quick note about the Fortifier Overguard: if you expect to maintain it at all times, then Prime Sure-Footed and all form of damage reduction are useless, as Overguard ignores DR and already provides Prime Sure-Footed's effect. I just assume I will only have it up sometimes. Feel free to use a drift mod if you want regardless. Anyway, aside from that, the build is just about cranking every non-efficiency stat, so her nuke is more effective, along with slotting Vigorous Swap and Arachne for those sweet multiplicative damage bonuses. Energy economy-wise, thanks to Nova's new passive and Synth Deconstruct working in tandem, you will get absolutely showered in various forms of orbs. Provided you keep speeding enemies up, the sheer volume of orbs that land at your feet is actually downright comical. As such, I slot a single Tau purple equilib shard and a primed flow and call it a day. I've also used no flow with no purple shard and just a single equilibrium, and that also works pretty well. In fact, it's the build I'm using in the background here. You could probably even free the mod space up entirely with just a single equilib shard if you wanted to push it. But flow in one shard makes it absurdly comfy, so I prefer that. Speaking of shards, other than the perp, I currently opt for 2 reds to increase her duration, scaling both the number of null star particles in her 4's reach, and then I just use good old cast speed and energy on spawn to round out the build. Cast speed is actually not all that important here due to the internal cooldown on recasting null star, but it's still always nice to have, and the energy one is also just more of a nice to have. You could of course min-max further by weaseling more reds in there, but I'm happy with this. Also, I should probably explain why I'm not running Archon Vitality. Basically, that's just because I found increasing the number of heat procs does not actually really matter all that much in this build. The damage comes more from the blast AoEs than the burn over time, with clumped enemies getting deleted before the heat procs even really have a chance to tick. The extra health is pretty whatever too, so I prefer to save the mod space and just drop it from the build entirely. Still a solid pick if you find yourself with extra mod space though. And as for other mods, you could use Transient Fortitude, and basically all the Augur mods are also worth considering. And if you really want even more safety, maybe a Rolling Guard, or Catalyzing Shields, or Quick Thinking, I guess. But that's stretching mod space pretty thin, if you ask me. Alright, I think that about covers it. Let me know what you think, or if you have any suggestions to improve the build. Please like and subscribe, or I will personally eat your firstborn child. Bye!